Our next speaker is Susan Moylan Coombs. She works on the Northern Beaches as an Australian First Peoples wellness consultant and director of the Guringai Festival. She'll be talking about culture and how it contributes to societal well-being. Let's welcome Susan to the TEDxPittwater stage.
Good morning. Thank you, Neil. Is he still here? No, for the welcome to country. I got to say, speaking after the former two speakers, it's kind of like we've been in space, we've been, got our feet in the dirt now, and there is this incredible synergy that is kind of happening, particularly when we look at our culture as Australia's first people, that there is an understanding that there is a sacred world, there is that universal oneness, and it is about being in space. And there is also the fact that we put our feet into the dirt and into the soil. So, I'd like to kind of now bring us all back to the humanity. We've been in space, we've recognised that soil is living, and we too are also living human beings. So, acknowledging that we're here on the homelands of the Guringai people. I'd also like to acknowledge that I have my ancestral links up to the Northern Territory, and I call this place my spirit country, and I've been living here for over 45 years, and there's a lot of work that's been done in this region. And as I was introduced, that I am also one of the festival chairs for the Guringai Festival, which has been about building relationships with communities and finding out about what unites us as communities and what makes us beautiful as people who reside here in the Northern Sydney region. So let me see if I can get this to work. I wanted to share with you around culture and what it means to have cultural intelligence and cultural immunity. And when we couple those things, that there is a sense of cultural well-being and wellness that can come into our being as spiritual beings on this planet as we walk across this landscape. And when we kind of think about all of these things, I wanted to point out that as the original people of this land, that we can acknowledge that we are Australia's first people. We are the original people of this place, and our ancestry is part of the oldest surviving living culture on this planet. And isn't that something to celebrate? That there is knowledge that we as Australia's first people have at a DNA level. And there is knowledge that we have that's intellectual knowledge about our cultural background and our ancestry and our links to the spirit world and also to the physical world and us as human beings. And one of the things that I'm constantly humbled about is the way that our knowledge holders want to continually share what is beautiful about our culture. And that is something for all of us to share in as we live in, as we call it, God's country here on the Northern Beaches. So I wanted to explore the sense of wellness that is for everybody. This year's festival, for the Guringai Festival 2014, we were talking about wellness because of the role that I now currently hold. And we wanted to say that wellness is for everything. It's something that unites us as human beings, and it's something that we all strive for. And what is it about our philosophies of wellness that we can share and maybe have the ability to influence service provision, influence mainstream, influence thinkings within community? My role at the moment is I'm the Australia's First People Wellness Consultant with an organisation called Community Care Northern Beaches, which is in fact just across the road. I have a background in television broadcasting, and I did that for almost 20 years. And there's kind of an intersect of what's happening with my current kind of professional career path that I'm taking at the moment. And there really is a bringing together of both my television background and also the role that I'm currently undertaking as Australia's First People. And what does that mean when we look at what are the philosophies that we have around wellness that is for all to share in? And then who are we as Australians who live in this space? What is it that's been our past and our history? And what is it that we can create for a future to live together? So my former background with television, it was about storytelling. And it was about facilitating voice for Australia's first people. And I worked for the ABC, I worked for SBS NITV, and it was really about, I wanted to share what was beautiful about who we were. I wanted to share our culture. I wanted to get that sense of spirit through the story, because that's what connects us, that's what unites us as people who live in this space. The work now, looking to the future, is how do we write the new story? How do we co-create the new story as people who live in this space at this point in time? We've had a shared history of trauma, and we all know that. And the thing that I find that if I share my story about being someone of the stolen generation, people kind of drop into emotions around that, which sometimes aren't useful. Because people kind of go, oh, really, did it happen? And, you know, it wasn't my fault. And it's like, yeah, I get that, I know that. But what do we do to get over that sense of guilt, that sense of the history that doesn't serve us? How do we together co-create and write a new story to move into the future? Because we need to do that for our children and our grandchildren. Because we as adults, we don't own this space and time. We're borrowing it from our grandchildren. So we need to be mindful about how we do that and how we walk across this landscape and how we together write the new story. Cultural intelligence. People are kind of talking about this stuff. You know, you have emotional intelligence, you have intelligence, and, you know, all that stuff. There is intelligence around our culture as Australia's first people. And the thing throughout history is that I don't really think that it's been valued. I don't think that the intelligence has actually been recognised. And the level of sophistication and it's multidimensional, and you know, it is there. It just may have looked different to a Caucasian Western kind of mindset. The intelligence, you know, when we look at cultural intelligence, and whether it's through business, whether it's through education, whether it's through whatever we do as people in communities, that there was this view for a while that we just needed to do cultural awareness courses. And look, you know, it's a bit like going on a holiday to exotic landscape. You take a few pictures, you get to hear from someone who's a bit of an expert. You take the photos, print them up, stick them in your photo album, shove it on the shelf. You might actually go back to it a bit later and go, oh, that's right, we went there, didn't we? And it was really nice. But you don't actually take it really on board. It doesn't actually become integrated into your being. And so whilst, you know, in a professional context, you might do a cultural awareness course, what is it that you take on board? And then it's kind of like, what is the understanding that you have around something that is different to self? Something that's different to your cultural background. So you need to actually then understand it, create that knowledge within you. When you do that, sometimes it also challenges your own sense of being and your own perspectives on life. So to be open to difference, you need to have a really strong core. You need to be self-aware of who you are when you're interacting with difference that's outside of you, that may look like something that's not your norm. So it's about understanding the lens of self, which we look at life through. When we shift into actually really wanting to doing things with people, then we need to actually change our approach. That's not to say that you need to change your core. You need to have a really strong core, because you're the expert in your own life. You've had this amazing life experience that's got you to this point. But how do you then be open to something of difference? How do you remain in your essence, but be respectful of something that's outside of you? Once we do that, and we're not in places of being triggered by difference and then justifying our own means, then there is what's now called competence. And, you know, we talk about culturally competence, you know, workplaces, we talk about cultural safety, particularly within my culture. We talk about, being in a workplace, being in an environment where we feel safe. And that's true for everybody, that, we want to feel safe in walking across this landscape. And so I just kind of wanted to explore that, when we get really good at this, because Australia is a multicultural country, that when we get better at that cross-cultural dialogue, then we do become more competent in it. I think I lost a title up the top, which was actually called, so I was like, and it's not up there either. It was actually called Cultural Immunity. And, when you look at the history in this country, that for Australia's first people, there is trauma. There is a lot of work around healing that we need to do. And I'd like to suggest that after the former Prime Minister Kevin Rudd's apology, that emotional grief and outpouring that we saw within communities across the country, I'd like to suggest that there's a lot of healing nationally that we need to do as Australians. So what is it that can create that sense of immunity for us? And that's for, when I say us, I mean everyone. But when you talk about immunity in terms of a physical ailment, it's like, what is the condition that permits either natural or acquired resistance to disease or dis-ease? Like, what is that? How do we build that within ourselves? How do we build that within our children? And and another word for it is resilience. So this term cultural immunity, a colleague of mine, Eliza Pross, who's here, we travelled to New Zealand, to Aotearoa at the beginning of the year, and the Maori people have a shared experience to us as well, except their history has been very different. And what is it that they look at in terms of their health and well-being? And they were using this term cultural immunity, which I think is actually really beautiful. How do we build that strength and resilience within us? What is it that we do that appreciates the cultural context that we come from? And then when you look at that, how are we growing up our kids to have that? So it's about those rites of passage. It's about understanding the culture. It's about understanding the sacred world. It's about understanding the physical world. Healthy soils. Everything. I'm losing all my titles. Anyway, I think I remember them. So this was about cultural wellness and well-being. We see it in a much more holistic view, and it takes in a number of aspects. And so we say our social and emotional well-being concepts, it's much broader. It takes in the land, it takes in spirit, it takes in our family context, it takes in community. And when we understand that we as individuals have a relationship with our family, our community, and the land and the environment, that is the oneness. And I think that we all seek that. We all seek to understand where we belong. We all seek to understand how we fit. What are the pieces of puzzles of my life? Culture expands us. The history contracts us. So when we talk about disease and we talk about wellness, and I put it into the context of myself and my children, I want to teach my children to have a strong sense of identity. I want them to have an understanding of what culture and my culture means to them as being a first Australian. From the Northern Territory, getting their feet into the dirt up there so they can spiritually connect to the landscape. That's important to me. What they also do need to understand is the history of our shared experience on this landscape as Indigenous and non-Indigenous people. And that's not to say that we want to deny the history. That's not to say that we don't want to understand the history. We can't change the history. We can only change our emotional mindset around that. We need to kind of accept what's happened, but then how do we have the adult conversation? How do I instill in my children what is beautiful about the culture, what is beautiful about humanity, so we can have the conversation about the new future and the new story? So in our cultural context, it's about the stories, the wisdoms, the knowledge from our elders. And I've been really blessed to have these two beautiful people as my teachers. And they have been guiding a lot of the work that I've been doing. And I always really like to acknowledge, particularly Uncle Bob Randall, who is the traditional owner of Uluru, and also Min Maya. In particular, these two people have a sense of what is for the greater good of humanity. And their teachings are about love. Their teachings are about how do we understand each other. Their teachings are about men's business, women's business, and the importance of rites of passage and the importance of how we have the conversation and the relationship together. So we are spiritual beings having a human existence, and we're doing it on a physical plane. And there was another slide that was meant to be in there, but that's okay. So the other slide was what I call the triangular balance. And there's an understanding that there is the sacred world, there is the human world, and then there is the physical world. And when you have that, that is the totality and the oneness. That we as First Australians, that when you remove us and dispossess us of the connectedness to country, there is a sense of loss. There is a sense that, like my right arm's missing, or I've lost my baby, or I've lost my connection to the mother. And when we have that balance and when we're able to live in that synergy, then there is a sense of wellness. Uncle Bob Randall, who talks about the Kanyini, and I don't know if you've seen the film Kanyini, his stuff is about the love. It's about love with responsibility. It's about how we have those relationships and dialogues together. So he talks about the Jukupa, and that is, there was a word called the dream time. We call it the dreaming. So it's about that space where the past, present and future is and how we can interconnect into that. And it's about the laws, and it's about what is the right and wrong as being a human, as being a spiritual being that walks this landscape. So it's about the right way to live. And it's also about Walcha. And that's about family. And that's the connectedness that, all of our elders talk about. There are 4 principles of the Kanyini. And he talks about the 4 energy points. And sometimes there are different perspectives to the way that we see things and the way that kind of the Western and the Eastern models of wellness and well-being. So you might understand them as chakra points. And I think there's 7 chakra points. But for us, there are 4 energy points. And there is the 2 serpent lines that come from the energy of Mother Earth, from that healthy soil that we walk on, that we hope to be walking on and creating more of. But then it also goes up to the universal oneness. And so it's about what is around the energy out there, the sacredness, and it's about having our feet in the dirt, and then it's about walking this lifetime, understanding the laws and understanding our roles and responsibilities. My other teacher is Min Maya, who was a Wiradjuri law woman. With the work that we've been doing at CCMB Community Care Northern Beaches, we used some of her teachings to create recovery teaching cards. I work on a project called Partners in Recovery, which is about people with severe mental health issues and concerns, and how can we use Australia's First Peoples wellness philosophies to influence mainstream. And we created these beautiful cards that there was 5 of them, I believe, that were utilised from her 13 teaching stones. And they're a bit like runes. And so there are creatures, and the one that I've always had an affinity to is the lesson of the bee. And again, it's about who we are as individuals and that connectedness and the oneness of us as individuals, to our families, to our communities, to the earth and the oneness. One of our cultural principles is that there was never an I. That we always talk about things in the context of the we. It's always about our communities. And we can only move as fast as the slowest link or the slowest person. And when you take that into consideration of in a traditional lifestyle, but also in a contemporary setting, that it is our older people, it is our elders, and it is our young ones. And as communities, we can only move as fast as them. So it is always about the we, it's always about the team, and it's always about shifting people from point A to point B. So when we do that, it's always being really mindful about the oneness and the belongingness. And when you replace the I with we, illness becomes wellness. Thank you.